Chapter 27. Padfoot returns. One of the best things about the aftermath of the second task was that everybody was very keen to hear details of what had happened down in the lake, which meant that Ron was getting to share Harry's limelight for once. Harry noticed that Ron's version of event changed subtly with every retelling. At first, he gave that seemed to be the truth. It tallied with Hermione's story anyway. Dumbledore had put all the hostage into a bewitched sleep in a Professor McGonagall's office, first assuring them that they would be quite safe and would awake when they were back above the water. 1 week later, however, Ron was telling a thrilling tale of kinship in which he struggled single-handedly against 50 heavily armed mere people who had to beat him into submission before tying him up. I had my wand hidden up my sleeves, he assured Padma Patil, who seemed to be a lot keener on Ron now that he was getting too much attention and was making a point of talking to him every time they passed in the corridor. I could have taken those mere idiots any time I wanted. What were you going to do? Snore at them, said Harmony waspishly. People had been teasing her so much about being in the thing that Victor Crumb almost missed that she was in the rather techy mood. Ron's ear went red, and thereafter he reverted to the bewitched sleep version of event. As they entered March, the water became drier, but cruel winds skinned their hands and faces every time they went out onto the grounds. There were delays in the post because the owls kept being blown off course. The brown owl that Harry had sent to Cyrus with the dates of the Hogsmeade weekend turned up at breakfast on Friday morning with half its feathers sticking up the wrong way. Harry had no sooner told of Cyrus' slippery than it looked flight. Clearly afraid it was going to be sent outside again, Cyrus' letter was almost as short as the previous one. Beard style at the end of the road out of Hogsmeade past Drevish and Banks at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Bring as much food as you can. He hasn't come back to Hogsmeade, said Ron incredulously. Look like it doesn't, said Hermione. I can't believe him, said Harry tensely. If he's caught, made it so far, though, hasn't he? Said Ron, and it's not like the place is swarming with dementors anymore. Harry folded up the letter, thinking if he was honest with himself, he really wanted to see Cyrus again. He therefore approached the final lesson of the afternoon double potion. Feeling considerably more cheerful than the usual, did he when descending the steps to the dragons. Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle were standing in the huddle outside the classroom door with Pansy Parkinson gang of Slytherin girls. All of them were looking at something Harry couldn't see and sniggering heartily. Pansy's pug-like face peered excitedly around Goyle's broad back as Harry, Ron and Hermione approached. There they are, there they are, she giggled, and not the Slytherin broke out. Harry saw what Pansy had a magazine in her hand, which weekly, the moving picture on the front snore of a curly-haired witch who was smiling toothily and pointing at a large sponge cake with her wand. You might find something to interest you in there, Granger, Pansy said loudly, and she threw the magazine at Hermione, who caught it, looking scared. At that moment, the dragon's door opened and Snape beckoned them all inside. Hermione, Harry and Ron headed for the table at the back of the dragon as usual. Once Snape had turned his back on them to write up the ingredients of today's potion on the blackboard, Hermione hastily rifled through the magazine under the desk. At last, in the central page, Hermione found what they were looking for. Harry and Ron leaned in closer. A colored photograph of Harry headed a short piece entitled Harry Potter's secret heart attack. Cruel like no other, perhaps, yet a boy suffering all that usual pangs of adolescence, right? Rita Skeeter, deprived of love since the tragic deaths of his parents. 14-year-old Harry Potter thought he had found solace in his steady Gryffindors at Hogwarts. Muggle-born Hermione Granger, little did he know that he would shortly be suffering yet another emotional blow in a life already littered with personal loss. Miss Granger, a plain but ambitious girl, seemed to have a taste for famous wizards that Harry alone cannot satisfy. Since the arrival at Hogwarts of Viktor Krum, Bulgarian seeker and hero of the last World Quidditch Cup, Miss Granger had been toying with both boys' affection. Krum, who is openly smitten with the devious Miss Granger, has already invited her to visit him in Bulgaria over the summer holidays and insists that he has never felt this way about any other girl. However, it might not be Miss Granger's doubtful natured charm that have captured this unfortunate boy's interest. She really ugly, say Pansy Parkinson, a pretty and vivacious fourth-year student, but she had be well up to making a love potion. She is quite brainy. I think that's how she is doing it. Love potions are of course banned at Hogwarts, and no doubt Albus Dumbledore will want to investigate this claim. In the meantime, Harry Potter well-wishers must hope that next time he bestowed his heart on a worthier candidate. I told you, Ron hissed at Hermione as she stared down at the article. I told you not to annoy Rita Skeeter. She's made you out to be some sort of a scarlet woman. Hermione stopped looking astonished and snorted with laughter. Scarlet woman, she repeated, shaking with suppressed giggle as she looked around at Ron. It's what my mom calls them, Ron muttered, his ear going red. If that's the best Rita can do, she losing her touch, said Harmony, still giggling as she threw Witch weakly into the empty chair beside her. Pile of old rubbish. She looked over at Slytherin, who were all watching her and Harry closely across the room to see if they had been upset by the article. Hermione gave them a sarcastic smile and a wave, and she, Harry, and Ron started unpacking the ingredients they would need for their wish-sharpening potion. There is something funny though, said Hermione 10 minutes later, holding her pestle suspended over a bowl of our better. How could Rita Skeeter have know what? Said Ron quietly. You haven't been mixing up love potion, have you? Don't be stupid, Harmony sniffed, starting to pound up her battle again. No, it's just, how did she know Victor asked me to visit him over the summer? Harmony blushed scarlet as she said this and determinedly avoided Ron's eyes. What? Said Ron, dropping his pistol with a loud clunk. He asked me right after he pulled me out of the lake. Hermione muttered. After he had got rid of his shark head, Madame Pomfrey gave both us blanket and then he sort of pulled me away from the judge to they wouldn't hear and he said I wasn't doing anything over the summer. Would you like to? And what did you say? Said Ron, who had picked up his pistol and was grinding it on the desk, a good 6 inch from his bowl, because he was looking at Hermione, and he did say he had never felt the same way about anyone else. Hermione went on going so red now that Harry could almost feel the heat coming from her. But now could Rita Seeker have heard him? She wasn't there. Or was she? Maybe she has got an invisibility cloak. Maybe she sneaked out onto the ground to watch the second task. And what did you say? Ron repeated, pounding his pistol down so hard that it dented the desk. Well, I was too busy seeing whether you and Harry were okay too. Fascinating though your social life undoubtedly is, Miss Granger said, an icy voice right behind them, and all three of them jumped. I must ask you not to discuss it in my class. 10 points from Gryffindor. Snape had glided over to their desk while they were talking. The whole class was now looking around at them. Malfoy took the opportunity to flash Potter stings across the dragons at Harry. Reading magazine under the table as well, Snape added, snatching up the copy of Witchy Weekly. A further 10 points from Gryffindor. Of course, Snape's black eyes glittered as they fell on Rita Skeeter's article. Potter has to keep up with his press cutting. The dragon rang with the Slytherin's laughter, and an unpleasant smile curled Snape's thin mouth. To Harry's fury, he began to read the article aloud. Harry Potter's Secret Heartache. Dear Potter, what's aligned you now, a boy like no other, perhaps? Harry could feel his face burning. Snape was pausing at the end of every sentence to allow the Slytherins a hearty laughter. The article sounded 10 times worse when read by Snape. Even Hermione was blushing scarlet now. Harry Potter's well-wishers must hope that next time he beat his heart upon a warrior candidate. How very touching, sneered Snape, rolling up the magazine to continue gale of laughter from the Slytherin. Well, I think I had better separate the three of you. You so you can keep your mind on your potions rather than on your tangled love lives, Weasley. You stay here, Miss Granger, over there beside Miss Parkinson's. Potter, the table in front my desk, move now. Furious, Harry threw his ingredients and his bag into his cauldron and dragged it up to the front of the dragon to the empty table. Snape followed, sat down at his desk, and watched Harry unload his cauldron. Determined not to look at Snape, Harry resumed the mashing of his scar battle image, each one of the have Snape's face. All these praise attentions seem to have inflated your hair already over large head, Potter, said Snape quietly. Once the rest of the class had settled down again, Harry didn't answer. He knew Snape was trying to provoke him. He had done this before. No doubt he was hoping for an excuse to take around 50 points from Gryffindor before the end of the class. You might be laboring under the delusion that the entire Wizardian world is impressed with you. Snape went on so quietly that no one else could hear him. Harry continued to pound his scarab beetle, even though he had already reduced them to a very fine powder. But I don't care how many times your picture appears in the paper. To me, Potter, you are nothing but a nasty little boy who considers rule to be beaten him. Harry tipped the powdered bitter into the cauldron, had started cutting up his ginger root. His hands were shaking slightly out of the anger, but he kept his eye down as though he couldn't hear what Snape was saying to him. So I give you fair warning, Potter. Snape continued in a softer and more dangerous voice. Size celebrity or not, if I catch you breaking into my office one more time, I haven't been anywhere near your office, said Harry angrily, forgetting his fire and defense. Don't lie to me, snapped his fathomless black eyes boring into Harry's boomslang skin gillyweed. Both come from my private store and I know who stole them. Harry started back at Snape, determined not to blink or to look guilty. In truth, he hadn't stolen either of these things from Snape. Hermione had taken the Blomstein skin back in their second year. They had needed it for the Polyjuice potion, and while Snape had suspected Harry at the time, he had never been able to prove it. Dobby, of course, had stolen the gillyweed. I don't know what you are talking about, Harry lied coldly. You were out of the bed on the night my office was broken into, Snape hissed. I know it, Potter. Now Mad Eye Moody might have joined your fan club, but I will not tolerate your behavior. One more night time stroll into my office, Potter, and you will pay. Right, said Harry coolly, turning back to his ginger root. I'll bear that in mind if I ever get the urge to go in there. Snip's eyes flashed. He plunged a hand into the inside of his black robes for one wild moment. Harry thought Snip was about to pull off his wand and curse him. Then he saw that Snip had drawn out a small crystal bottle of a completely clear potion. Harry stared at it. Do you know what this is, Potter? Snip said in eye glittered in dangerously again. No, said Harry with a complete honest this time. It's a white tarsum, a truth potion so powerful that the 3 drop would have you spilling your innermost secret for this entire class to hear, said Snape viciously. Now, the use of this potion is controlled by very strict ministry guideline, but unless you watch your step, you might just find that my hand slipped. He shook the crystal bottle slightly right over your evening pumpkin juice, and then Potter. Then we'll find out whether you have been in my office or not. Harry said nothing. He turned back to the ginger root once more, picked up his knife, and started slicing them again. He didn't like the sound of the truth potion at all, nor would he put in past Snape to slip him some. He repressed a shudder at the thought of what might come spilling out of his mouth if Snape did it, quite apart from landing a whole lot of people in trouble. Hermione and Dobby, for a start. There were all the other things he was concealing, like the fact that he was in contact with Cyrus, and his inside squirmed at the thought how he felt about Joe. He dipped his ginger root into the cauldron too, and wondered whether he ought to take a leaf out of Moody's book and start drinking only from a private flask. There was a knock on the dragon's door. He entered, said Snape in his usual voice. Last look around as the door opened, Professor Padfoot came in. Everyone watching as he went up towards Snape's face. He was twisting his finger around his jaw and looking agitated. We need to talk, said Karkaroff abruptly when he had reached Snape. He seemed so determined that nobody should hear what he was saying that he was barely opening his lips. It was as though he were a rather poor ventriloquist. He kept his eyes on his ginger root, listening hard. I'll talk to you after my lesson, Karkaroff, Snape muttered, but Karkaroff interrupted him. I want to talk now, while you can't slip off, Severus. You have been avoiding me. After the lesson, Snape snapped, under the pretext of holding a major cup to see if he had poured not enough armadillo bile. Harry sneaked a sidelong glance at a pair of them. Karkaroff looked extremely worried, and Snape looked angry. Karkaroff hovered behind Snape's desk for the rest of the double period. He seemed intent to preventing Snape from sliding away at the end of the class, keen to hear what Karkaroff wanted to say. Harry deliberately knocked over his bottle of armadillo bile with 2 minutes to go to the bill, which gave him an excuse to duck down behind his cauldron and mop up while the rest of the class moved noisily toward the door. What's so urgent? He heard Snape hiss at Karkaroff. Yes, said Karkroff, and Harry, peering around the edge of his cauldron, saw Karkroff pull up the left hand sleeves of his robe and show Snape something on his inner forearm. Well, said Karkaroff, still making every effort not to move his lips, do you see? It's never been this clear ever since. Put it away, sneered Snape, his black eyes sweeping the classroom. But you must have noticed, Karkaroff began in an agitated voice. You can talk later. Karkaroff spat at Snape. Potter, what are you doing? Clearing up my automobile, Professor, said Harry innocently, straightening up and showing Snape the sogan rag he was holding. Karkaroff turned on his heel and strode out of the dragon. He looked both worried and angry, not wanting to remain alone with an exceptionally angry Snape. Harry threw his book and ingredient back into his bag and left at the top speed to tell Ron and Hermione what he had just witnessed. They left the castle at noon the sixth day to find a weak silver sun shining down upon the ground. The weather was mild than it had been all year, and by the time they arrived in Hogsmeade, all three of them had taken off their cloak and thrown them over their shoulder. The food Cyrus had told them to bring was Harry's bag. They had sneaked a dozen chicken legs, a leaf of bread, and a flask of pumpkin juice from lunch table. They went into Gladrag Wizardwear to buy a present for Dobby, where they had fun selecting the most luxurious socks they could find, including a pair patterned with a flashing gold and silver stars, and another that screamed loudly when they became too smelly. Then, at 1:30, they made their way up High Street past Davish and Benches and out toward the edge of the village. Harry had never been in this direction before. The winding lane was leading them onto the wild countryside around Hogsmeade. The cottages were fewer here, and their garden larger. They were walking toward the foot of a mountain in woozy shadow Hogsmeade light. Then they turned a corner and saw a stile at the end of the lane. Waiting for them, its front paw on the topmost bar, was a very large, shaggy black dog. It was carrying some newspaper in its mouth and looking very familiar. Hello, Cyrus, said Harry when they had reached him. The black dog sniffed Harry's back eagerly, wagged its tail once, then turned and began to trot away from them across the scabby patch. The ground that rose to meet the rocky foot of the mountain, Harry, Ron, and Hermione climbed over the stile and followed. Cyrus led them to the very foot of the mountain, where the ground was covered with boulder and rocks. It was easy for him with his four paws, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione were soon out of the reach. They followed Cyrus higher up onto the mountain itself. For nearly half an hour. They climbed a steep winding the story path. Follow Cyrus, wagging tail, sweating the sun, the shoulder strap of Harry's bag cutting into his shoulder. Then at last Cyrus slipped out of sight, and when they reached the place where they had vanished, they saw a narrow fissure in the rock. They squeezed into it and found themselves in a cold, dimly lit cave. Tethered at the end of it, one end of his rope around a large rock was Buckbeak, the hippogriff, half-grey horse, half-giant eagle. Buckbeak fires orange eye flash at the sight of them. All three of them bowed low to him, and after regarding them imperiously for a moment, Buckbeak bent his scaly front knees and allowed Hermione to rush forward and stroke his feathery neck. Harry, however, was looking at the black dog which had just turned into his godfather. Cyrus was wearing a ragged grey robe, the same one he had been wearing when he had left Azkaban. His back hair was longer than it had been when he had appeared in the fire. It was untidy and matted once more. He looked very thin. Chicken, he said hoarsely after removing the old daily profits from his mouth and throwing them down onto the cave floor. Harry pulled open his bag and handed over a bundle of chicken leg and bread. Thanks, said Cyrus, opening it, grabbing a drumstick, sitting down one of the cave floor and tearing off a large chunk with his teeth. I have been living off rat mostly, can't steal too much food from Hogsmeade. I had draw attention to myself. He grinned up at Harry, but Harry returned the grin only reluctantly. What are you doing here, Cyrus? He said. Fulfilling my duty as a godfather, said Cyrus, galloping on the chicken bone in a very dog like way. Don't worry about it. I am pretending to be lovable, Stray. He was still grinning, but seeing the anxiety in Harry's face, said more seriously, I want to be on the spot. You last letter. Well, let's just say things are getting fishier. I have been stealing the paper every time someone throw on out, and by the look of things, I am not the only one who's getting worried. He nodded at the yellowing daily prophet on the cave floor, and Ron picked them up and unfolded them. Harry, however, continued to stare at Cyrus. What if they catch you? What if you have been seen? You three and Dumbledore are the only ones around here who knows I am animagus, said Cyrus, shrugging and continuing to devour the chicken leg. Not nudged Harry and passed him the Daily Prophet. There were two. First, though the headline, Mystery Illness of Barton's Crouch. The second, Ministry, which still missing, Ministry of Magic now personally involved. Harry scanned the story about Crouch. Fraser jumped out at him, hasn't been seen in public since November. House of Prayer deserted St. Mango's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries declined comment. Ministry refused to confirm rumors of critical illness. They are making it sound like he is dying, said Harry slowly, but he can't be that ill if he managed to get up there. My brother Crouch personal assistant, Ron informed Cyrus. He say Crouch is suffering from overwork. Mind you, he did look ill last time I saw him up. Said Harry slowly, still reading the story. The night my name came out of the goblet, getting his comeuppance for seeking Winky. Isn't he? Said Hermione, an edge to her voice. She was choking Buckbeak, who was crunching up Cyrus' chicken bone. I bet he wished he hadn't done it now. Being bet he feels the difference now he is not there to look after him. Hermione obsessed with house elf, Ron muttered to Cyrus, casting Hermione's a dark look. Cyrus, however, looked interested. Outsack his house elf, yea, at the Quiche World Cup, said Harry, and he launched into the story of the Dark Mark parents, and Winky being found with Harry's wand clutched in her hand and Mr. Crouch fury. When Harry had finished, Cyrus was on his feet again and had started pacing up and down the cave. Let me get this straight, he said after a while, brandishing a fresh chicken leg. You first saw the elf in the top box. She was caving crowd seats, right? Right, said Harry, Ron, and Hermione together. But Crouch didn't turn up for the match. No, said Harry. I think he said he'd been too busy. Cyrus paced all around the cave in silence. Then he said, Harry, did you check your pocket for your wand after you had left the top box? Um, he thought hard. No, he said finally. I didn't need to use it before we got in the forest, and then I put my hand in my pocket, and all that was in there were my ominocular. He stared at Cyrus. Are you saying whoever conjured the mark stolen my wand in the top box? It's possible, said Cyrus. Winky didn't steal that wand, Hermione insisted. The elf wasn't the only one in the box, said Cyrus, his brow furrowed as she continued to piece. Who else was sitting behind you? Lots of people, said Harry. Some Bulgarian minister, Cornelius, the Malfoys, said Ron suddenly, so loudly that his voice echoed all around the caves, and Buckbeak tossed his head nervously. I bet it was Lucius Malfoy. Anyone else, Cyrus? No one, said Harry. Yes, there was. There was Ludo Bagman. Hermione reminded him. Oh, yeah, I don't know anything about Bagman except that he used to be bitter for the Wimborne Waps, said Cyrus, still pacing. What's he like? He's okay, said Harry. He keep offering to help me with the Triwizardian tournament. Does he now? Said Cyrus, frowning more deeply. I wonder why he had do so that. Says he's taking a liking to me, said Harry. Said Cyrus, looking thoughtfully. We saw him in the forest just before the dark mark appeared, Hermione told Cyrus. Remember, she said to Harry and Ron. Yeah, but he didn't stay in the forest, did he? Said Ron. The moment we told him about the riots, he went off to the campsite. How do you know? Hermione shot back. How do you know where he disappeared to? Come off it, said Ron incredulously. Are you saying you reckon Ludo Bagman conjured the dark mark? It's more like he did it than Winky, said Hermione stubbornly. Told you, said Ron, looking meaningful at Cyrus. Told you she's obsessed with house. But Cyrus held up a hand to silence Ron. When the dark mark had been conjured and the elf had been discovered holding Harry's wand, what did Crouch do? Went to look in the bush, said Harry, but there wasn't anyone else there. Of course, Cyrus muttered, pacing up and down. Of course, he had went to pin it on anyone but his own elf, and then he sacked her. Yes, said Hermione in her hated voice. He sacked her just because she hadn't stayed in her tent and let herself get trampled. Hermione, will you give it a rest with the tail? Said Ron. Cyrus shook his head and said, she got the measure of Crouch better than you have, Ron. If you want to know what man's like, take a good look at how he treats his inferiors, not his equals. He ran a hand over his unshaved face, evidently thinking hard. All this absence of Barty's Crouch, he goes to the trouble of making sure his house elf saved him a seat at the Quidditch World Cup, but doesn't bother to turn up and watch. He worked very hard to reinstate the Triwizard tournament, and they stopped coming to that too. It's not like Crouch, if he's ever taken a day off work because of illness before this, I'll eat Buckbeak. Do you know Crouch then? Said Harry. Cyrus' face darkened. He suddenly looked as menacing as he had the night when Harry first met him. The night when Harry still believed Cyrus to be a murderer. Oh, I know Crouch all right, he said quietly. He was the one who gave the order for me to be sent to Azkaban without a trial. What? Said Ron and Hermione together. You are kidding, said Harry. No, I'm not, said Cyrus, taking another great bite of chicken. Crouch used to be the head of Department of Magical Law Enforcement, didn't you know? Harry, Ron and Hermione shook their head. He was tip for the next Minister of Magic, said Cyrus. He's a great wizard. Barty Crouch, powerful magical and powerful hungry. Oh, never a Voldemort supporter, he said, reading the book on Harry's face. No, Barty Crouch was always very outspoken against the dark side, but then a lot of people who were against the dark side, well, you wouldn't understand. You are too young. That's what my dad said at the World Cup, said Ron with a trace of irritation in his voice. Try us, why don't you? A grin flashed across Cyrus' thin face. All right, I'll try you. He walked once up the cave, back again, and then said, "Imagine that Voldemort's powerful now. You don't know who his supporters are. You don't know who's working for him and who isn't. You know he can control people so that they do terrible things without being able to stop themselves. You are scared for yourself and your family and your friends. Every week news comes of more death, more disappearance, more torturing. The Ministry of Magic is dizzy. They don't know what to do. They are trying to keep everything hidden from the Muggles, but meanwhile, Muggles are dying too. Terror everywhere, panic, confusion. That's how it used to be. Well, time like that bring out the best of some people and then worst in others. Crouch Principle might have been good in the beginning. I wouldn't know. He rose quickly though the ministry and he started ordering very harsh measures against Voldemort's supporters. The horrors were given the new power to kill rather than capture, for instance, and I wasn't the only one who was handed straight to the Dementor without trial. Crouch fought violence with violence and authorized the use of the unforgivable curse against suspects. I would say he became as ruthless and cruel as many of the dark side. He had his supporter, mind you. Plenty of the people thought he was going about things the right way, and there were a lot of witches and wizards clamoring for him to take over the Ministry of Magic. When Dumbledore disappeared, it looked like only a matter of time until Crouch got the top job. But then something rather unfortunate happened. Cyrus smiled grimly. Crouch's own son was caught with a ground of Death Eaters who had managed to talk their way out of Azkaban. Apparently they were trying to find Voldemort and return him to power. Crouch's son was called Miss Harmony. Yay, said Cyrus through his chicken bone. Then he sighed and now on the ground beside. He gave up the and I had imagined should have spent a little more time at home with his family, shouldn't he? Ought to have left the office early once in a while, gotten to know his own son. He began to wolf down large piece of bread. Was his son Death Eater? Said Harry. No idea, said Cyrus, still suffering down bread. I was in a cabin myself when he was brought in. This is mostly stuff I have found out since I got out. The boy was definitely caught in the company of people I had bet my life were Death Eaters. But he might have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, just like the house elf. Did Crouch try and get his son off? Hermione whispered. Cyrus let out a laugh that was much more like a bark. Crouch let his son off. I thought you had the measure of him, Hermione. Anything that threatened to tarnish his reputation had to go. He had decided his whole life to becoming Ministry of Magic. You saw him dismiss a devotee house elf because she associated with the dark mark again. Doesn't that tell you what he is like? Crouch? Father's affection stretched just far enough to give his son a trial, and by all account it wasn't much more than an excuse for Crouch to show how much he hated the boy. Then he sent him straight to his cabin. He gave his own son to the Dementors. Asked Harry quietly. That's right, said Cyrus, and he didn't look remotely amused now. I saw the Dementors bringing him in, watched them run through the bars in my cell door. Can't have been more than 19. They took him into a cell near mine. He was screaming for his mother by nightfall. He went quiet after a few days. Through they all went quiet in the end, except when they shrinken in their sleep. For a moment they didn't look in Siren's eyes because more pronounced than ever, as though shuttered and closed behind him. So, he's still in his cabin, Harry said. No, said Cyrus dully. No, He is not in there anymore. He died about a year after they brought him in. He died. He wasn't the only one, said Cyrus bitterly. Most go mad in there, and plenty stop eating in the end. They lose the will to live. You could always tell when a death was coming because Demeter could sense it. They got excited. That boy looked pretty sickle when he arrived. Crouch being an important ministry member, he and his wife were allowed a deathbed visit. That was the last time I saw Barty Crouch half carrying his wife past my cell. She died herself apparently shortly afterward. Grief wasted away just like a boy. Crouch never came from his son's bed. He, the Dementors, buried him outside the fortress. I watched them do it. Cyrus threw aside the bread he had just lifted to his mouth and instead picked up the flask of pumpkin juice and drained it. So old Crouch lost it all. Just when he thought he had it made, he continued wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. One moment, a hero poised to become Ministry of Magic. Next, his son's dead, his wife dead, the family name dishonored. And so I have heard since I escaped a big drop in a popularity. Once the boy had died, people started feeling a bit more sympathetic toward the son and started asking now a nice younger land from the good family had gone so badly astray. The conclusion was that his father never cared much for him, so Cornelis Fudge got the top job and Crouch was shutted sideways into the Department of International Magical Cooperation. There was a long silence. Harry was thinking of the way Crouch's eye had bulged as he looked down at his disobedient house elf back in the wood in the Quidditch World Cup. This then must have been why Crouch had overreacted to Winky being found beneath the dark mark. It had brought back memories of his son and the old scandal and his fall from grace to the ministry. Moody saw Crouch is obsessed with catching dark wizard, Harry told Cyrus. Yeah, I have heard it's become a bit of mania with him, said Cyrus, nodding. If you ask me, he still thinks he can bring back the old popularity by catching one more Death Eater. And he sneaked up there to search Snape's office, said Ron triumphantly, looking at Hermione. Yes, and that doesn't make sense at all, and Cyrus. Yea, it does, said Ron excitedly, but Cyrus shook his head. Listen, if Crouch wants to investigate Snape, why hasn't he seen coming to judge the tournament? It would be an ideal excuse to make regular visits at Hogwarts and keep an eye on him. So you think Snape would some up of something then? Asked Harry and Hermione broke in. Look, I don't care what you say, Dumbledore trusts Snape. Oh, give it rest, Hermione and Ron impatiently. I know Dumbledore's brilliant and everything, but that doesn't mean a really clever dark wizard could fool him. Why did Snape have Harry's life in the first year then? Why didn't he just let him die? I don't know, maybe he thought Dumbledore would kick him out. What do you think, Cyrus? Harry said loudly, and Ron and Hermione stopped bickering to listen. I think they have both got a point, said Cyrus, looking thoughtfully from and Harmony. Ever since I found out Snape was teaching here, I have wondered why Dumbledore hired him. Snape always been fascinating by the dark art. He was famous for it at school. Filmily, oily, greasy-haired kid he was, Cyrus added, and Harry and Ron grinned at each other. Snape knew more curses when he arrived at school than half of the kids in the seventh year, and he was part of a gang of Slytherin who nearly all turned out to be Death Eaters. Cyrus held up in a finger and began ticking off names. Rosilla and Wilkes. They were both killed by Aurora the year before Voldemort fell. The Lestrange, they are married couple, they are in Azkaban, aware from I have heard he wormed his way out of the trouble by saying he had been acting under the Imperious curse. He's still at large, but as far as I know, Snape was never ever accused for being Death Eater. Not that means much, plenty of them were never caught. And Snape's certainly clever and cunning enough to keep himself out of trouble. Snape knows Karkaroff pretty well, but he wants to keep that quiet, said Ron. Yeah, you should have seen Snape's face when Karkaroff turned up in the potions yesterday, said Harry quietly. Karkaroff wants to talk to Snape. He says Snape's been avoiding him. Karkaroff looked really worried. He showed Snape something on his arm, but I couldn't see what it was. He showed Snape something on his arm, said Cyrus, looking frankly bewildered. He ran his finger distractedly through his 50 hairs and struggled again. Well, I have no idea what's that about, but if Karkaroff is genuinely worried and he is going to Snape for answer, Cyrus stared at the cave wall, then made a grimace of frustration. There is still the fact that Dumbledore's trust safe, and I know Dumbledore's trust where a lot of other people wouldn't. But I just can't see him letting Snape teach at Hogwarts if he had overworked for Voldemort. Why are Moody and Crouch so keen to get into Snape's office then? Said Ron stubbornly. Well, said Cyrus slowly, I wouldn't put it past Mad Eye to have searched every single teacher's office. When he got to Hogwarts, he takes the defense against the dark arts seriously. Moody, I'm sure he trusts anyone at all, and after the thing he is seen, it's not surprising. I'll say this for Moody thought he never killed if he couldn't help it. Always brought people in alive where possible. He was taught, but he never descended to the level of Death Eaters. Crouched through his different matter. He is really ill. If he is, why did he make the effort to drag him up Snape's office? And if he is not, why he is up to? What he is doing at the World Cup that was important, he didn't turn up in the top box. What's he been doing while he should have been judging the tournament? Cyrus lapsed into silence, still staring at the cave wall. Dick was spurting around on the rocky floor, looking for the bones he might have overlooked. Finally, Cyrus looked up at Ron. You say your brother Crouch, personal assistant. Any chance you could ask him if he's seen Crouch lately? I can try, said Ron doubtfully. Better not make it sound like I reckon Crouch is up to do anything doggy. So Percy loves Crouch. And you might try and find out whether they have got any lead or Bertha Jorkins. You're at in, said Cyrus, gesturing to the second copy of Daily Prophet. Batman told me they hadn't, said Harry. Yes, his quote in the article in the said Cyrus, nodding at the paper, blustering on about how bad Bertha's memory is. Well, maybe she's changed since I knew her, but Bertha I knew wasn't forgetful at all. Quite the reverse. She was a bit dim, but she had an excellent memory for gossip. She used to be get her into a lot of trouble. She never knew when to keep her mouth shut, and I can see her being a bit of liability at the Ministry of Magic. Maybe that's why Bagman didn't bother to look for her as for so long. Cyrus saved an enormous sigh and rubbed his side away. That's the time. Harry checked his watch and then remembered it hadn't been working since it spent over an hour in the lake. It's 3:30, said Hermione. I better get back to school, Cyrus said, getting to his feet. Now listen. He looked particularly hard to Harry. I don't want you to lot sneaking out school to see me. Alright, just send notes to me here. I still want to hear about anything good, but you are not to go leaving Hogwarts without permission. It would be an ideal opportunity for someone to attack you. No one tried to attack me so far except a dragon and a couple of Grindylows. Harry said, but Cyrus scolded at him. I don't care. I'll breathe freely again when this tournament's over. And that's not until June. And don't forget, if you are talking about me among them yourself, call me Snuffles, okay? He handed Harry an empty napkin and flask and went to pat Buckbeak's goodbye. I'll walk to the edge of the village with you, said Cyrus, if I can change songs another paper. He transferred into a great black dog before they left the cave, and they walked back down the mountain with him across the boulder screwed ground back to the slide. Here they allowed each of them to pat him on the head before turning and setting off at the run found the outskirts of the village. Harry, Ron, and Hermione made their way back into Hogsmeade and up to Hogwarts. Wonder if Percy know all that stuff about Crouch, Ron said as they walked up the drive to the castle, but maybe he doesn't care. I had probably just make him admire Crouch even more. Yeah, Percy loved rules. He just say Crouch was refusing to break them for his own son. Percy would never throw any of his family to the Dementors, said Hermione severely. I don't know, said Ron. If he thought we were standing in the way of his career. Percy really ambitious, you know. They walk up the stone step into the entrance hall where delicious smell for dinner wafted toward them from the great hall. Poor old Snuff, said Ron, breathing deeply. He must really like you, Harry. Imagine have you to live off rods. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, see ya. Bye bye.